Hello, this is a special meeting of the Select Board for Monday, September 20th. We're here today to discuss the question of scheduling a special town meeting on Tuesday, October 5th, 2021. So I don't know if the other Select Board members want to have a brief discussion. Let me just read the two warrant articles that are to be considered. One is to appropriate, borrow, or transfer funds to pay costs of a settlement in the matter of Gerald Alston versus the town of Brookline. And the other one is to appropriate, borrow, or transfer funds for fossil fuel-free ground source heat pumps for the Driscoll School. We had a brief discussion about this last Tuesday, but didn't know if there were any other thoughts before I moved for those two warrant articles to be put on a special warrant that will appear before town meeting on October 5th. Okay, seeing no discussion, I will move approval to appropriate, borrow, or transfer funds to pay costs of a settlement in the matter of Gerald Alston versus the town of Brookline. Melissa, do I do these separately?
What you can do is refer to the memo that I wrote on September 10th. And I can just read it to you, and then you can call the roll after that. So we're just kind of reaffirming those votes. So the first thing that we did was to approve the moderator's request for a remote town meeting. So that's the first motion.
So before we do that, now I see hands, John first, and then Bernard.
Thank you very much. And I simply raise my hand in case there are people sitting in on this meeting, listening, whatever. Just want to clarify that this vote is simply to put these articles on the warrant. And this is not a vote, in case people are wondering, of yes or no on the content of the articles. We're going to have a hearing and we're going to have a discussion of that. And, we're going to keep, although many of us have expressed our opinions already on both of these articles, and I'm one of those, we always keep open minds, and town meeting isn't until, well, in this case, October 5th. And that's why we want to hear from the public as well. But this vote is just to actually create the warrant with the articles on it, in case anybody's wondering.
Thank you. Bernard?
Yeah, I just wanted to use this occasion to ask people that when they describe the agreement, that they do not indicate that it is the agreement of the entire board. I did not participate, and I don't want the public record to indicate that I did. Secondly, I assume that later on we're going to have a report from the advisory committee, particularly with respect to the basis for the calculation of the $11 million. I understand that there was some discussion at the advisory committee meeting today about that. It was not discussed on Friday. So at the appropriate time, I assume that Raul and Melissa will make that presentation.
Will that be captured in the combined reports? I assume it will.
Well, of course, but we are having a hearing today, and that's relevant to the hearing.
We're not having any warrant article review hearings today.
I believe that we are.
Yeah, I thought
in order to meet the deadline for the combined reports, I believe that's part of what we're doing at 11:15.
Oh, okay. Okay, so Melissa, do you have the language for a remote town meeting?
So I think we already approved the moderator's request last week. So I was just reading my memo again. It's really just the first thing that you want to do is vote to call a special town meeting on Tuesday, October 5th at 7 o'clock at the high school auditorium via Zoom, and to waive the requirements of section 2.1.2 through 2.1.4 of the town's bylaws, to open and close the warrant and insert in the warrant the following articles as included in your select board packet, where Article 1 is the $11 million settlement for the Alston case, and Article 2 is the Driscoll geothermal appropriation. So that's the first vote.
Okay, so all those in favor, Bernard?
Abstain.
John,
Aye.
Raul,
Aye.
Miriam,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye.
And then the second vote is to execute the warrant for the October 5th, 2021 third special town meeting.
Great. All those in favor? Bernard,
I'm sorry, what's the date on that?
October 5th, 2021 third
Oh, I'm
special
sorry.
town meeting,
Okay.
executing the warrant.
Right, abstain.
Raul,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Miriam,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. Are those all the votes related to the third?
For item 3, yes, those are all the votes we need for item 3.
Okay, thank you very much, Melissa.
No problem.
Okay, so my mistake, we are having a warrant article public hearing, but it is scheduled for 11:15.
It's okay though, because it's not a legal notice requirement, so you can begin the hearing early.
Okay, great. So this is a public hearing, so I will open the public hearing. Who wants to go first? Raul?
Sure. Happy to. As we announced last Tuesday, the non-conflicted members of the board reached a settlement agreement with Mr. Gerald Alston, and that would essentially, as a universal agreement, it would end all outstanding litigation, and that includes against the town and individually named defendants. And the $11 million agreement that we reached includes any and all future payments. As many folks know, he was ordered return to work with pay and then ultimately retirement benefits. And this would include that amount as well. And we don't have the benefit of our counsel today to talk about some of the finer points of the agreement itself. But happy to the best of my ability and to answer any questions that folks have about that. We have on Friday, myself and Melissa presented at the an advisory committee subcommittee that was appointed to address this matter, and we literally this morning were meeting at with them as part of the continuation of that meeting. The focus really of that subcommittee is trying to think about how best to pay for this settlement. The board has recommended, again, the non-conflicted members of the board have recommended that this be bonded, but the subcommittee is considering the possibility of a blended or hybrid approach that would include some money coming out of this year's budget and the remainder of it being bonded. They'll be making a recommendation. They'll be voting on a recommendation today, which will then be discussed at the advisory committee meeting on Wednesday night.
I know I've gotten some questions about how long the bond is. I know we were waiting on guidance from the state. Melissa, have we received anything?
So we are requesting a 10-year term, but ultimately that decision is out of our hands. We won't know that yet. But I put together a schedule for the advisory committee to understand what it would mean to finance $11 million over 10 years. And then we've also spent the weekend kind of trying to see if we can bring that number down and use other funding sources to do that.
Great, thank you. Any other questions by board members? John.
Thank you. Just a couple of points. I am aware of the finer points of, whether we were obligated to wait until 11:15 or not. I do know that interest has been expressed by some individuals that I've been involved in emailing back and forth with and so on, especially as to the Driscoll article. And I assume because they're not here yet that they took at face value that they didn't have to be here till 11:15. Oh, I take it back. I see there are participants. I didn't realize that there was a whole list there. I was under a mistaken assumption that we were the only ones in the room at this point. But since we've opened the door here on the discussion briefly of the, should I just confine my comments to the first of the two, the Alston at this point?
Please.
Yeah. I was in attendance at the meeting that Raul just spoke of, and I think we're going to be in some harmony with the advisory committee on this when the day is done. It was very interesting to witness them walking through the very thought processes and sort of decision trees and you name it, options and so on, as the select board did. And some of the key members who have already spoken as to their, the view that they are coming to at this point, have said more or less that they think maybe the select board, came to a necessary conclusion, given the lay of the land, given what we know about the way these things can go, and given what we know as to the record of how these things sometimes go, and given the facts of the case, and given the needs of justice in this case. So I don't want to be, Pollyanna-ish about this. No one, says it's going to be easy to, if town meeting does indeed decide that we should go with the settlement. It's $11 million. It's going to be, quite a bit for the town to swallow through borrowing and or other means and or some combination of borrowing and other means. But there's an interesting convergence so far that the select board just may have got it. Maybe we got it right, and we have a good proposal here. I hope that that's the agreement of the town at large when this is all over.
Miriam.
Thank you. So I just think it's important. I think it's important that we evaluate this agreement in two different narratives or with two different lenses. And the first, because I think we've talked about it, there is a justice piece here. There is a moral obligation. And I think both there's a moral obligation in terms of what we owe Gerald Alston, and there's also an obligation to come out with the universal agreement to protect everyone who's been named. And I think that this does that. And it's been very thoughtfully done, and a lot of time and conversation and back and forth has gone into this agreement. But I think in terms of the fiscal part of this, I also think this is a fiscally responsible agreement, because otherwise we're handing our credit card over to the bartender and opening a tab at the judicial bar of Massachusetts, and we're paying lawyers, and we're risking a settlement of which we would have zero control over. So I think if you evaluate this agreement on both the important lenses, it comes out that this is a good agreement. And I'm very proud of what we did as a select board. I think we have in fact kept both the justice and the financial lens, one in each hand, as we measure this and go forward. So I'm very happy, and I a special shout out to all of those who are at the actual table doing the hard work. So thank you.
Any other comments? Okay. Should we slide into the other warrant article discussion?
Should we take public comment on this first?
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. This is a public hearing. So are there any people signed up to speak? Hold on, John. I'm just waiting for Devin.
At this time, there are 9 attendees, and no one has used the hand raise or Q&A feature to indicate they'd like to make a comment.
Okay. John?
I just want to be sure we don't preclude the possibility that people who arrive 5 minutes from now, 10 minutes from now, have missed their chance to comment on the Alston article.
I'll take them if they sign up.
Thank
They
you.
let Devin know that they want to speak.
Great, thanks.
So should we slide into the geothermal discussion?
Well, Chair, I would just say that if the board wants to have their recommendation included in the combined reports, you should take a vote today so that we can include that. And the deadline is next Monday. So I don't think that we have this on the calendar for tomorrow. And my recommendation at this point would be to set forth the motion that was in the agreement. If there is a compromise motion proposed by the advisory committee, we can take it up again and see where we are with that. I can call that up so that you have the actual language.
Please.
Devin, I need a little assist here.
And Heather, to be clear, to meet what John was asking, we'll still vote on it today, but we want to not vote just yet in case there are more people that might have comment, but we'll vote before we leave today, right?
Yes, I won't close the public hearing for another couple of minutes, just in case anybody does show up that wants to make comments. But we could vote on the language right now.
So can you see what I put forward?
Yes, I can.
Okay, good.
How do people feel about voting right now as opposed to waiting?
Just question, if I may. Voting right now essentially would be a confirmation by those of us who voted for this agreement that that we're still for this agreement. Is that pretty much what we're doing here?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of weird because we're the convening authority that is asking for the special town meeting. It's our warrant article, and now we're advising town meeting on the warrant article
progress
that we created. So, but in essence, yes, we're weighing in on a warrant article that we ourselves filed. Bernard, do you want to add anything?
Well, it's not just the members who voted to support this warrant article, it's the full board that has to vote on this.
Correct, because it's a warrant article going before town meeting. Should we wait? Should we vote?
I'm comfortable voting.
Okay,
I'm comfortable voting because we'd be restating something that's already on the record, as far as I can tell.
correct. I do want to address why I will abstain. This has been by far the hardest issue that has come before the board during my tenure. And I really need guidance from town meeting. So I believe that we need to make the argument, and I will accept whatever the outcome is at town meeting. So I can move the language. Okay, so I will do that. That the town appropriates $11 million to pay costs of a settlement in the matter of Gerald Alston versus the town of Brookline, United States District Court, pertaining to Gerald Alston's employment as Brookline firefighter and claims he asserted against the town and town officials, including the payment of all costs incidental or related thereto, said funds to be expended under the direction of the select board, and that to meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the select board, is authorized to borrow said amount under the pursuant general law or any other enabling authority, and to issue bonds or notes of the town therefore. Any premium received by the town upon the sale of any bonds or notes approved by this vote, less any such premium applied to the amount of the costs of issuance of such bonds or notes, may be applied to the amount of costs approved by this vote in accordance to the general law, and thereby reducing the amount authorized to be borrowed to pay such costs by a like amount. That is the motion. Bernard.
Yeah, because I do not believe that this is a prudent decision or that it meets our fiduciary duties as government officials, I vote no.
Raul.
Aye.
John.
Aye.
Miriam.
Aye.
And the chair abstains. Okay, moving on to the geothermal discussion.
Promoting Dave Gasock.
Good morning, Dave. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning. Thank you for allowing us to join you this morning.
So we pulled your originally filed for the normal fall warrant into our special. So if you want to describe the language that you had filed.
Sure, happy to. And I think there are some other folks from the team here who will, depending on your preference, Madam Chair, either give public comment or be switched over to panelists to help provide, answer questions, et cetera. I think some combination of Scott Englander, Andy Fisher, possibly Helen Charlepsky are here, who are available in that regard at your discretion. But I'm happy to give an overview of what we're asking for now, and then you follow however is helpful to the board.
I think at this time, maybe we concentrate on you being the presenter, and then if we do encounter questions, we'll then promote.
Sounds good. Let me just put up, I'm not going to go drag you through the entire slide deck, but I'm happy to dive into more detail wherever you want. This has been put together by the team that I mentioned, along with the project team, and helping to update their calculations over the past few days since the board decided to accelerate this article, and thank you for that. So key message here is what we're asking for ultimately in town meeting is both an appropriation and request for authority to borrow, subject to further refining guidance from Melissa and the town administrator's office as to exactly how best to frame this, and also subject to advisory committee guidance, which we'll be getting this week. But the total that the project team is quoted for the change is $4.8 million. And that would be a change from the current base heating and cooling system of the Driscoll School project, from air source heat pumps to ground source heat pumps. Big picture, this change is projected to cut the building's electricity consumption by 25% and its monthly demand, and Scott Englander can help explain the nuance of the difference between the two, by 44% on average over the course of the, let's say 75 years plus or minus expected useful life of the building. Also, the change is expected to pay for itself and more. We'll go through the fact that there are multiple payback calculations that have been floated using different assumptions and scenarios, but the short version of all of them is somewhere between the first 20% of the building's expected lifespan and halfway through the building's expected lifespan, this change would pay for itself completely and then start generating money back for the town in terms of savings from reduced electricity, capital repairs, maintenance. So it both reduced carbon emissions, which we need to do, and reduced our long-term cost profile for the building. It's kind of a win-win in that regard. So just very quick refresher, and with apologies to my much more learned colleagues if I butcher any of this, because they're the real experts. For those who aren't familiar, ground source heat pumps draw from 900-foot deep wells in the ground where the temperature is a constant, approximately 50 degrees Fahrenheit all year. Use that to generate heat in the winter and use it to sink heat and therefore provide cooling in the summer. It is a much more efficient system than air source because, as you see from the graphic, winter air, as we know around here, when we're trying to heat a building, the outside air does not always cooperate by providing much heat. And in the summer, when we're trying to cool a building, the outside air is frequently the, what's driving the building to be hot in the first place, along with solar gain anyway. So the fact that we're drawing from the ground at 50 degrees in both cases rather than a highly variable outside ambient air temperature makes this a much more efficient system. So this is the upfront investment. Like I said, just short of $4.8 million is the up-to-date number from Friday. Talking to the project team, and there's some detail here that we can, if you want, we can go over as to what goes into that amount, but that is all in hard costs and soft costs. Also, there's no material delay associated with this, according to the project team. It might delay field readiness after the building is already done by maybe a month, they said, but in terms of building completion, it does not cause any change in anticipated timeline. So why do we say it pays for itself? Lower projected maintenance costs. The project team projects about a 5% reduction there. So a little bit lower, it's not a whole lot to move the needle. Materially lower capital replacement and repair costs. The project team projects a 60% reduction in capital replacement and repair costs over the course of the project because the system just has fewer moving parts that need to be replaced over time. And then markedly lower projected electricity costs, which is the biggest needle mover here. And Scott Englander from Precinct 6 is a true professional expert in this area and has helped the project team refine its calculations in this regard to come up with what a more accurate forecast might be. And then not included in our calculations yet, but an additional benefit, it also could add a revenue stream from the sale of alternative energy credits or certificates, which are not currently the current base bid system, the air source heat pump with a fossil fuel fired backup does not allow, but the ground source system would, and this could be an additional revenue stream to further offset cost. And we're working on to get you some better numbers on what that might be, but it's icing on the cake for now. So just a quick, the numbers are a combination of the project team, Garcia, Galuska, and D'Souza consulting engineers, Jonathan Levy architects, left field, ran most of the base electricity usage, demand projections, maintenance, capital repair savings. Thank you to Melissa Goff for providing us with a bond financing schedule on very short notice. We appreciate it. And then Scott Englander, as I mentioned, refined the electricity cost and savings analysis and is, I believe, here and can answer questions. So let's just jump to the bottom line. So we have a big projected difference in annual electricity demand, both on the consumption side and the demand charges side. And again, Scott's the expert here to help answer detailed questions here. But as you can see in each case, we've got the base case, which is column, which is the current system, the GSHP column in the middle, which is the if we change over to ground source heat pumps, and then the savings associated with that change, so the delta between the two columns. So if you look at the total average over the course of a year at the bottom, it basically cuts electricity consumption by about a quarter off of an already fairly efficient system. It takes a big bite out of even that. It cuts electricity demand by much more than that, by actually, well, by almost by 2/3 or so. And that's a big part of the savings. And so there are various ways to calculate CO2 emissions reduction. So we don't want to hang our hat on any one particular number as the number, but a fair ballpark order of magnitude estimate is over on the right, that this savings in usage, given current New England generation conditions, would save in the ballpark of 100 metric tons of CO2 emissions per year at today's emissions rates. So why do we say it pays for itself? So I've got a bond, principal and interest debt service over 20 years in this left-hand column. And you'll see the time scale starts years 1 to 10, but then jumps to 15, jumps to 19, 20, 21, 25, 50, 75. So it's not a purely linear time scale just to fit on the slide. So this is 20 years worth of debt service, assuming a 3% interest rate. We've most recently been able to borrow at rates much better than that on our bonding, but this is to build in some conservatism there. So it's 3% And this is the schedule of debt service that Melissa provided us, and thank you again for that. The total annual projected savings here in this next column is a combination of the projected electricity cost savings with Scott's refinements to it, which the project team is working to update their official model on right now and may be done with as soon as today, plus maintenance savings and capital repair savings. And then the annual budget impact is the outlay for the debt service offset by the total annual projected savings. And so we've got simple annual and cumulative in the middle, and then discounted on the right side using a 3% discount rate assumption, just to give a sense of time value of money there. So what this comes out to is, let's just use simple terms because it's easier. Right around, we've got a couple of years, 1 to 2 years, depending on when the actual debt service starts, of $350,000 to $400,000 outlay on the bonds. And then from there, it very quickly, the annual electricity, maintenance, et cetera, savings start to kick into mostly offset. And then by about year 8, give or take, these are projections, by about year 8, we get net positive. We're actually saving more in operating costs than we're paying on the debt service. By year 15, we're north of $125,000 annually positive in non-discounted dollars. By year 20, that's getting close to $250,000. By year 25, after the bond has been fully paid off, now we're talking about $500,000 a year in savings in operating costs. By year 50, we're talking north of $1 million a year. By year 75, north of $2 million a year. When you put a discount rate on it, obviously, the further out in time those savings go, the more the more gets cut out of them for time value of money. But this is the general gist. Select Board Member Ashkenazi, did you have a question? Okay.
I answered it myself by looking at the rest of the table.
Okay.
This
So
is very
basically,
good, Dave, but how much longer is the presentation?
how about I'll go to there, which is, this is our last realistic chance to make this change before we build this building, and it's going to cost a ton more to retrofit it if we ever wanted to do that. This is a chance. We all agree that we need urgent action to reduce energy consumptions and carbon emissions. We've got a chance right in front of us. And unlike most chances, this one pays for itself. This one actually would make economic sense even without the sustainability benefit and the carbon emissions benefit, but we get both. So I will stop there and happy to answer questions or to draw on Scott Englander and others to help him.
Great. So before I open it up to questions, I'm going to officially close the public hearing from the Gerald Alston warrant article. I don't believe we got any members of the public that wanted to sign up to speak on that, Devin?
That's correct.
Okay. And then I'm going to officially open this public hearing. Miriam and then Raul.
Great, thank you. Thank you for this, Dave. Very, very, very helpful. Can you talk to me a little bit more about how we might be able to sell carbon offsets?
If it's okay with you all, I'd like to, if Scott Englander is in the audience right now, I'd like to promote him to answer that question because he's going to do it a lot more reliably than I will.
Devin, can you please promote Scott Englander?
All right. Hello, everyone. Oh, looks like my camera is not showing up here. Let's see. Well, I'll tell you what, rather than waste your time, I'll go ahead without the camera. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this, we can't sell carbon offsets from this, but what we can sell are alternative energy certificates under the Massachusetts Alternative Energy Portfolio Standard, which is much like the Renewable Portfolio Standard. In that, in the Renewable Portfolio Standard, you have a renewable system it can produce renewable energy certificates, which we call RECs. And under state statute, the electricity suppliers are required to procure a certain percentage of their load every year in alternative energy credits and RECs as well. So, and those numbers are increasing over time significantly. And this is under, it's not like some kind of incentive program that can go away easily. This is under Massachusetts general law and regulations. Miriam, I should pause and ask, is this what you were referring to, or were you really interested in carbon offsets?
No, this is what I was referring to. Thank you.
Okay, great. It's somewhat similar in that we are taking environmental attributes that are created by the system and selling them. And just to a bit of a nuance, the air source heat pump, which is the base system that the town would be considering, it doesn't have fossil fuel backup per se on site, but it does have an electric boiler supplemental heat, because the heat pump can't meet the entire load. It wouldn't be economically feasible for it to do that. And so, it is not therefore eligible under this program, whereas the ground source heat pump is. Now, basically, I said that AECs are like RECs, except it's for different technologies, including this one. The requirement is now about 5% of retail sales. That's increasing. If the electricity suppliers don't meet their obligation, they have to pay a penalty. And that penalty basically puts a cap on the price that these credits are traded for in the market, because obviously they wouldn't pay more for them than the penalty that they would have to pay if they don't procure them. Now, AECs are currently trading in the $23 to $24 range. There's a proposal out there by the Division of Energy Resources to increase that and increase the requirement. Now, how does the Driscoll system produce AECs? Well, there would have to be a monitoring system in place, metering. It's relatively simple. The town would contract with an independent verifier that's approved by DOER. And basically, once it has the metering system in place, the data acquisition collects information on the system's operation, and it basically banks these AECs as they're created, and then the town is in the position of either selling them under contract or at spot prices. And so that's about it. I am in the process of trying to estimate what this revenue would be worth. I've been going back and forth with GG&D, the project team, to get some information that I need to do that, and that is still in progress.
Thanks, Scott. The only thing I'll add is that, just to be clear, this AEC certificate potential revenue stream is not currently factored into our repayment calculation. This would be bonus on top of that at whatever level Scott's able to project.
Okay. Time check. We've been on this for about 20 minutes. So Raul.
Thanks. My question, and I don't know, maybe this is even Melissa's question, but I see that there are multiple potential approaches to paying the debt service. Which one is being moved at town meeting? What's the plan here?
So yes, let me, the ones that we've arrived at so far, subject to further guidance from senior staff and from the advisory committee and from this board, are as follows. We think we're subject to any correction from the town administrator's office that this additional amount could be bonded and debt excluded under the December 2019 debt exclusion vote as a a fossil fuel free, highly efficient school was part of what was contemplated at the time of that vote, and was only because of unforeseen construction cost escalation afterward that further adjustments had to be made after that time. So that's one approach. This could be debt excluded, subject. We need to get, I think, Department of Revenue, just sign off on that. I defer to Melissa's expertise on that over mine. Second option, we could choose if we wanted to not add additional taxation under a debt exclusion approach, and instead pay some or all of this out of operating budget lines that will realize the savings, as soon as the building opens, and from there, there might be a short couple of year bridge that needs to be made in there that will, if we want to take this approach, but that's a second option. And then obviously there's the possibility, but we don't want to count on it, of further federal infrastructure funding coming down the road after the, beyond the current ARPA funds that we have and you guys have put a process in place around. So that's that'd be great. We're not counting on that. I would focus on options 1 and 2, plus anything else that the advisory committee and senior staff may suggest. But we're, with apologies, given that this got accelerated last week, we're working to tie up a couple of those loose ends as to best approach now. So there's not one definitive answer.
Okay, so it looks like what you provided in the slides is based on option 2, if I'm not mistaken. And so those numbers, in terms of the budget impacts, for instance, would be different depending if we went with option 1 or 3, right?
So kind of, let me go back to this. So this is assuming that we need to issue a bond to pay for this up front. This schedule should hold regardless of how we choose to pay for the debt service on that bond. So we still get, there's a budget line items difference. There's not a bottom line difference, in the sense of if we issue a bond at this assumed interest rate to pay that amount, this is what our repayment obligation would be on the debt. This is what our savings in town operational budget lines. I think most notably the town building electricity that that's under Charlie Simmons' operating budget would benefit from, we project. And then the question is just how do we account for tying those together, right? We get them either way. One way to do it is to pay this debt service through additional taxation under a debt exclusion. In effect, we'd collect the additional taxes, we'd use it to pay the debt service. We'd get this operating budget benefit, on top of that, because we'd have paid for the debt service from a different source. Again, Melissa, please jump in and correct any of this that I'm messing up if Melissa's still here. So that's one option. If we instead chose not to, you as the select board, I think, chose not to use a debt exclusion ability to further put this onto tax bills, and wanted to fund it internally from budget, we would just pick a budget line to fund, in effect, the bond P&I payment amounts, and we get the annual projected savings in primarily the electricity budget. And it would be a question of netting those two out against each other in the budgeting process. Does that help clarify?
I think so. I think only, just making clear option 1 is adding it to basically where the money's coming from the folks who've already voted, well, some that didn't, to fund the Driscoll School and adding that to the tax bills, whereas option 2 would be coming out of the town's budget itself, right? So that's, I guess my last question is, who's deciding and when is it decided? Will this be clear at town meeting what the funding approach will be? And it sounds like maybe you're asking us to help figure that out. I'm just not sure.
Well, so we can make a recommendation. I don't know specifically yet whether we need to specify that option in the town meeting motion under this warrant article. There may be multiple motions under this warrant article, depending on what the AC thinks of the right approach, which we would try to harmonize to the extent possible to make sure we had one approach. I think ultimately, my sense is that the decision to actually take advantage of a debt exclusion ability to put this debt service into tax bills would ultimately have to come, I believe, from the select board, as you set tax rates generally, but I'm not 100% sure of that. I can double check and figure that out between now and later this week in town meeting, unless Melissa's here and can just answer that off her head.
Well, I can jump in. I know that we've been in communication with a state agency that oversees debt exclusion overrides. And if we add to it, we need their permission like we did with the high school. So we're in communication with that agency, but they have not given us a yay or nay on whether or not we can in fact do that. So we're checking. John.
Thank you. And thank you, Dave. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, everyone who has offered their energy and insight and expertise to this process. It should be obvious to all who are watching this session that there are people with much greater expertise in this than mine to comment on these questions, and mine being, sort of like amateur level. So I, as an amateur without expertise on some of the questions that Dave has dealt with and that Scott has dealt with, I try to make this contribution to our discussion. This is not the first time that a community has addressed the question of the feasibility of a ground source heat system for a school project. You can go back to before the year 2000, and there were communities who were starting school projects and with this included, with ground source heat pumps. And then you can go back and you can find where after those schools had a few years of experience with the ground source system, did the experience match the optimistic projections of payback? And guess what? The studies, very reputable studies, very thorough studies that looked at maintenance costs, the actual experience of the heating and air conditioning costs, those studies found ground source heat pumps are the way to go. If you're looking for payback, they are the way to go. And I don't think there's that much dispute about this. So that's the first thing that I sort of rest my decision in this on. The second thing that I rest my decision on is that we have more than one way to address the need to have upfront money pay for something that is going to pay us back in future years. It doesn't have to be through debt exclusion borrowing. It does have to be through borrowing, because then you spread the costs out over the years and then you realize the benefit of the payback over the years. And Dave showed how that works. But we do capital investment borrowing all the time. And the real question we're dealing with in this instance is, can we find the room in our capital improvement borrowing for this project? Not everything in our capital improvement borrowing has this kind of a payback associated with it. I think this would move pretty high in our prioritization of capital improvement spending through borrowing compared to some of the other stuff that we are going to have to spend on. No doubt about it. But we can find room for this because it's going to pay for itself over a period of years. And I think we just need to get town meeting to agree with that sound judgment about the wisdom of making capital improvements when they can pay for themselves. And then we can then we will work out whether the borrowing qualifies under the original debt exclusion for Driscoll or not. And the state might say no, who knows? But if the state says no, there are other ways to do capital improvement projects without having to get state approval to do it through debt exclusion. And we can find those ways, especially for capital improvements that pay for themselves.
Okay, it is 11:51. I know I could only take an hour off of work today, so we need to wrap this up in less than 10 minutes. Any other comments by board members? This is a public hearing. Are there any hands raised by members of the public? Bernard, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Sorry. Yeah, I just want to make a quick point that if we fund this using CIP monies, that means that certain projects that may not be as important as this, but have a constituency in town would have to be cut. And I think we just have to keep that in mind when we start talking about the CIP budget.
Any members of the public, Devin?
Andrew Fisher has been promoted to a panelist.
Great.
Thank you.
Co-petitioner, Andy.
Good morning, thank you. I'll try and finish this while it's still morning and not keep you longer than I need to, but I think this is a great opportunity, as Select Board Member Fernandez has pointed out earlier in this working on this proposal. This is something that we need to do if we're going to confront climate change, and often we have to make tough choices about how we're going to pay for what we have to do to make climate change. But here we have the opportunity of being rewarded by huge savings in return for doing those things that are often tough things that we have to do. This is a huge step, and it's a huge opportunity, as Select Board Member Fernandez has pointed out, to lead not just in the town, but statewide. And I just want to thank the board for considering this and showing the leadership on climate change.
Great, thank you very much.
The next person signed up for comment is Lisa Cunningham.
Hi, I'll also try to keep my remarks short. Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Dave, for the great presentation. I just want to add or emphasize, too, that maybe we're missing the elephant in the room, which is that we have a climate crisis that we have to address. And the way that we have to address that is to get to reduce our emissions by 50% in 8 years. There's been a lot of news in the news lately about the UN IPCC report. The head of the UN spoke out over the weekend. It's essential that in order to do this, in order to get to 50% reduction, that we make every single new building and renovation in town as energy efficient as possible. That's what using ground source heat pumps would do. We have to minimize our fossil fuel use. That's what using ground source heat pumps would do. And we have to use renewable energy in order to get to net zero. That's what using ground source heat pumps will do. So this project is incredibly important in reducing our emissions in the town and making our town cleaner. It's also, this project will also be used, in my understanding, as a cooling center. So it's going to be operating all year long. It will be used by many residents in Brookline. Not everything in climate-related mitigation is going to pay for itself, but this project will pay for itself. In addition, if we address solar and battery, we can lower our electricity use by another 50%, which will lower our operating costs by another 50%. That's something that this committee has not had time to look into, but it's something that we certainly should. There's going to be an unprecedented amount of money coming in from the state on ARPA funds and then from the federal government. We also have a crack at that, at those funds for this project and many other climate mitigation projects that will need to be done in town. And this is not a question of picking and choosing projects in terms of climate mitigation. We have to do all these projects in order to get to our stated climate goals and in order to provide a livable future for the citizens of our town and our town in general. So I think this is a project, we are not leading the way, by the way. There are many other towns and cities that have gone with net zero schools, including using ground source heat pumps all over our surrounding neighbors, all over Massachusetts. I'd be happy to give a list of those. We're not leading the way, but we do have to lead the way for the town. Thank you.
The next person signed up for public comment is Jessie Gray.
Just wanted to thank the board. It's not always easy for government to be flexible enough to take advantage of opportunities like this, which is a 100-year opportunity. It comes along only when a new building like this is actually constructed. So I just want to thank you for your flexibility in working so hard to make this possible.
Great. Any other members of the public?
At this time, there are 9 attendees and no one has used the hand raise or Q&A feature to indicate they'd like to make a comment.
Okay, at this time, I will close the public hearing. And is it okay with the board that I move the language for a vote? Okay. I don't have the language before me. Melissa, do you? Okay, favorable action. Do I just move favorable action on this?
Well, I don't have our language available because I haven't had a chance to run the by town council and bond council. So I would just maybe, in the words of the article, subject to conversion to a motion as constructed by town council and bond council, and then I'll get back to you with the actual language.
Okay, so I'm moving what exactly?
I would just say, favorable action on Article 2, and then I'll convert it into a vote based on that.
Okay, thank you very much, Melissa. So I move favorable action on warrant Article 2 that will be on the special town meeting October 5th. All those in favor? Bernard.
Aye.
Raul.
Aye.
John.
Aye.
Marion.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thank you very much, all of you, for your hard work. I think it will pay off at town meeting.
Thank you all.
Thanks,
Thanks
everybody.
very much.